Hello, Audrey. Glad you could make it. Videos will be up after class. I thought I would have everything posted faster, but it was very, very slow today, so I do apologize. I had to wait a long time for everything to upload for the other class. And I think a couple of hours in this class are still spooling to get through, so hopefully by like an hour after class everything should be posted up if everything goes as well as it should, and it should go faster than it is. But anyhow, glad you're here. I'll give it like another minute or so. I usually give it a couple minutes. This second class, people tend to get in here kind of slow. And with Carlos missing, he's usually in here. And for Carlos was last class. Daniel is the one who's usually in here in this class. And I'll just give it another moment or two. And while we are waiting, if you have any questions that you would like me to answer, please write those out and I will address those first. All right. It's a good question. When and how do you approach the details of a pattern like plaid or paisley or print, anything that's on a surface? There are two answers to that. One of them you're going to do when you work with fillets. So you first build the primary form and you get the value system working properly. And you find the shadow pattern and you block that out. Then you find the edge between the light and the shadow, whatever it is, hard, soft, firm. And then you turn the rest of the form with the rest of the gradation that you need to get things to feel three-dimensional. And then you build the pattern on a new layer. And build it in part or as a whole. It's up to you, depending upon how complex it is. And then put in the design. And then take that design. And there's one of two ways to do this. You can either go to Liquify, or you can go to Transform and Warp. And then you mold it. Now this is the digital way of doing things, because we can. If we were doing this traditionally, you would do all the same steps and then do this at the very end, but obviously this would be already bent to the surface that you're trying to apply it to, because you would have to draw it that way. You couldn't do it like this. And now it fits poorly. I made this corner sink too much. I'm going to go ahead and fix that corner so it goes better with the form underneath. But you would warp it after the fact, so it makes it easier for you. When we're working with the lace, you're going to be doing something very similar. You're going to be creating a pattern. And you want to think about the pattern as one so that everything fits properly, because when you're dealing with stuff like Paisley, it's all very organized design. It's not random. There's nothing random about it. If it were random, it would never work. And then once you have all of this worked out, then you take this, duplicate the layer, offset the layer, and the layer that's underneath will now be a cast shadow of the layer on top. And then all we have to do from there is take the cast shadow layer, is that the right layer? Actually, I'll make this the cast shadow layer. So the shadow is now lighter. And we'll go and blur it slightly so it's not the same kind of sharpness. And now we have, like lace, an object that's casting shadows onto the object that it's sitting on top of. Because that's what lace is doing. It's sitting on top of the skin. So it's projecting its shadows onto the skin. And we're doing a similar thing over here as we are over here. Both of these are effects. We're warping a surface to create an effect, whether it's a shadow being cast or it's the object being warped or turned. We're doing this after the fact. And you can hand paint these things on, like if we had like a sleeve and we had that paisley stuff. Why is that going lighter? That's weird. So you could think about the surface, and that's why these grid lines are so important, because these grid lines tell you exactly where on the 3D object you're putting something. So now I can draw the paisley on here, and I can get it to conform to those curves. I mean, it takes some work, and it takes vision to be able to see that what you're doing is going with the surface. But you could hand draw all these things. You just have to be very good at being able to map the pattern onto the grid. But that's why the grid is so important. That's why when we're doing these things, I'm not just saying this just, to kind of like mess with your head. I'm actually saying these things because it's what you're going to be doing, right? You're going to be transferring data onto this surface, whether it's a pattern or it's light and shadow, something's going to be mapped over onto it. And you're responsible for figuring out how to map it on. There isn't any software that's going to help you with this. It's on you. So unless you can see this and you can feel this and you can understand that it's on this grid, that you look at it and go, oh, this edge along here is the edge that separates the stuff facing up from the stuff facing down, because the contour on there shows you that. This contour is facing this way. All the contour under here is facing down this way. So anyway, I forgot there's just one of you. It's not like you're going to all of a sudden be like, yeah. If we had more than one in here, we probably would have more of a dialogue back and forth about all of this. Not that you're not making dialogue, but I'm just saying that if there was more than a few people, we would probably have that thing going, that ping pong thing going between conversations. It's all about being able to project. Everything that we're talking about is being able to project. What you're asking in the question is projection. It's putting something on a surface, mapping it out, just like everything else here. And the reason that these lines going around the form are so important is that they tell you how to shade. Each one of these is facing in a totally different direction. So if the light is coming down this way, as an example, it's going to probably hit this direction here, not as much on this one, and definitely not this one. So the shadow pattern then would be shaded along this plane, knowing that all of this is facing away from the light, and probably the stuff on the underside here, and all this stuff will be in a halftone. So it won't be as dark, which means I probably need to make this even darker to make this a little bit lighter. And then the stuff that's facing it is going to be the brightest. So I shouldn't even make that dark, because it has to face that light source in the way that it's illuminated. So those grids tell me everything. They totally help me out as long as I make them useful. And it's the reason I have all of you practicing this process, because you're trying to learn how to see the surface. It's the same thing as building a 3D model. You know, you could say, well, here's my model right here. It's like, great, but that doesn't help me. Um, where are the places where things turn, right? And you're going to give me the same places where they turn on both sides, or are you only going to draw one side and make me guess at the other? Right? I need to be able to see like all these little changes along here, all these little contours. I'm looking at where they are and I'm trying to mirror them over here so that the modeler can look at this and go, okay, yes, symmetrical. Here's the cheekbone that's over here. Here's the muzzle that's over there. One side of the nose from the center line, the other side of the nose to the other side center line, right? I'm balancing things out from side to side. And I'm using a grid to help me do that. I'm plotting with the math. That's this whole idea of construction drawing. Everything that you're learning is construction, and construction begins with reading and mapping and measuring. Reading the surface, mapping and measuring the distances between things on that surface, and then committing to whatever completion with that thing that you need to do. So again, mapping, if we're going to have an ear right here on the skull, then it's probably a good idea through the form and using the ellipse around the head that we would be able to find that same edge over on the other side through the form, right? We just went through the form. There's the middle right there. And there's the other side that matches this side over here at the same distance from the eyes that are up here, right? This edge and this edge. We're mapping, we're finding. And if it weren't for these contours that we wrap around the form, I would not have been able to find the information that's right here on this side, also over on the other side in the same place. That would not have been a thing I could do. All I would be able to do is maybe go down along this way. But going this way to this way, I wouldn't know how to do that. And measuring is about going, if we draw a square here, measuring is this for us. A graphic designer that puts logos on a page, sometimes the logo might have depth to it, but it's about finding a shape and getting it to fit on the page so that it catches your attention. And then the logo is placed within the shape to find balance. In picture making, we do the same thing. We go this way and this way, but we also go this way, which is to say we're going back into space and we're creating an illusion of depth. So we have three directions, X, Y, and Z, that we're going in. And everything that we do, especially everything in here, is mapping the XYZ coordinates, but over the human form, which is organic. So that means that the cylinders that we're making for the arms and for the legs aren't just from side to side. They also have a corner somewhere in them that changes direction of the side to sideness. And even that stuff changes, like it gets bigger back here than it is here, than it is here, and so forth. Those shapes change because the muscle shapes change. And those muscle shapes underneath influence the material and cause the folds to occur. That's why these half locks happen in here, not just because the arm bends, but also because of the shapes of the muscles and the way that they push on the material. So you get a fold in here through the material that's both on the top as well as on the bottom. It's on both halves. Because this material has nowhere else to go. It has to do something right here. This is the joint, or this is the point in the material at the joint in the elbow where the material is going to have the most stress. And the elbow is not going to have as much. This is where everything is pushing outward. This is where everything's bunching inward. And sometimes the material hangs off of the body a little bit differently because it's heavier. Like if I wore a baggy sweatshirt, the folds might come all the way out to out here, which means that these lines are going to really change drastically. But we still find the end of it as a pipe because that's the place where the material changes direction. And then we draw the rest of the material to meet that pipe. So we find the billows, the excess, the stuff that hangs off even further. But already these contour lines have become vital because, like, if I need to pull a fold across here, it's not going to just go like this. It's going to go like this, and it's going to conform to where this changes direction along here because the contour I drew helps me see that. And then it's also going to dip over here. It's going to change direction over here. So it makes it a lot easier for me to problem solve this stuff because the contours are giving me a roadmap to the 3 dimensions. That is what the wireframe of a 3D model does. Without a texture on it, that wireframe helps you visualize the dimensions of the volumes you're building into or you're seeing. Like this line, I'm able to travel across the surface because I know exactly which direction things are moving in by looking at the surrounding contours, right? All the lines are now helping me make decisions. The next decision to make is where do the shadows fall? And they're going to, if my light is coming down this way, they're going to fall on anything that's not facing back up towards it. So all of this under here won't be in light. It'll be in shadow because it's facing downwards. But I can see that in my grid. My grid helps me accomplish these things. I would not be able to do this without it. I mean, I could, but I would be guessing all the time and constantly putting something in and erasing it out, putting something in and erasing it back, putting something in and adding to it, then erasing it, then adding to it and erasing it. And it's never going to be clean enough. And the whole idea of learning how to draw is not to make messes to a finish. It's to make clean decisions to a finish. That means no battlefields within your picture space. Everything should fit nicely. Yep. And this is also why I have everyone else look at your work. Because you're the one doing it correctly. If you notice in the other videos, go look at Audrey's work. She's doing it correctly. Yes, I was using you, sorry, because you did it. You put the grid in there. You finally got it right. It's not easy to see that, and it's not easy to use it, but it takes time to connect with it. And not everybody is able to connect with it. There's still a lot of drawings that aren't even using it yet. It's just hard. And I think sometimes when something's hard, we fear trying instead of just failing. And you kind of didn't worry about that. You just went in and went. And so, yeah, there's some things that aren't totally accurate, but that's all right. You're doing it. And it's easy to fix something once you're already doing it. It's easy to address things and make sense of things in conversation because you're doing it. There's depth because you have experienced it. You can relate to the experiences. Like I could tell you things about the stuff you're doing, and you probably go, yep, that's exactly the way it felt. That's exactly the way it, it hurt like that. It was hard like that. It was easy like that. All those things you would totally be able to relate to because you've already experienced it. You've done successful ones and you've done not so successful ones, but both of those are experiences and we accrue all of them. And that's what helps us make better decisions in the future. We don't look at the successful ones and go, oh, I remember when it felt like that. You barely feel those, but you remember the painfully bad ones. Totally remember those. It's like watching a car accident. You never forget it. It's traumatic. It jars your brain. Every time you do something wrong and you're conscious of it, it jars your brain. You kind of remember it, which is what we're supposed to do with all these bad drawings. We're supposed to remember all those experiences because it helps inform you of the next and then the next and the next. And the last 4 that we just did now informs the 5th, along with the other 7,500. right? And that's exactly it. That's kung fu. That's good sport, right? When you're a really good athlete and you do well, it's because of all the memory. It's not just that you're sort of like distinctly better than other people. It's you're better than other people because you use those facilities more, those faculties more. You go back into them more often. You connect with them whether they're good or bad connections, and it reminds you and it helps you react. Reaction comes from that stuff. So you react to making a better drawing as a result of bad drawings. You're doing that. You're making them good, you're making them not so good, you're remembering all of it, and it's giving you a leg up because you're reacting to both and you're making better decisions. But you're also using everything. You're pushing that boundary to understand what it means. And I don't know if you totally know what you're doing with it, but it appears as though you do because the forms feel the right kind of dimensional. They don't feel guessed at so much that it's like, you just clearly don't understand people, do you? There isn't anything in there like that. There's no distinctions that make it stand out so much that, yeah, you still need some work on certain things. What you just need is more practice. And I would even say more editing. So you can cull it down even further. You don't need as many, but they need to be exactly where you need them to go for you to be able to shade better, because that's what they are there for. It's to make better decisions for your shading. So you can avoid like 10 of them over here and just put 3 in, but put the 10 over here because you didn't quite understand all the complexity in it and you needed more lines. So you spend a little more time focusing on the stuff that's like brain burner, I don't get it. And in the areas that are easier, you just put a few in there just to remind you. And then when you put your shadow pattern in, you have it move across that line exactly where you know the shadow pattern to change. And that contour feeds you information about the contour above it and below it. Around in this space is where you're going to make the same contour in the same kind of way. And you're creating shorthand for yourself. That's mileage. Mileage equals adaptation. Adaptation equals manipulation, right? Because at that point, you should be able to conceptualize it in other forms because you've solved the problem now. And as you experience this problem in different ways using or working in different jobs or different media, you can recognize the history that will help you make better decisions even in those instances. That's what this whole idea of remembering is about, and the whole idea of making mistakes. Make them and be okay with it. It's part of the process. But you have to make them because you don't know what it means to make them correct if you haven't made them wrong. When you're told they're wrong, then you go through a process of correction until you find it. And then you have a physical answer for it because you've experienced it. That's what it means to be correct. That thing right there. Okay. Throw me some other questions if you have them. And while you're doing that, I want to go back through and explain the shading thing really quickly because a few of you are a little bit confused. So as you're shading, eventually the line work does go away. You cover it up. But along the way, you need it there to help you divide things. So we'll take this sleeve right here as an example. I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to call this NodeTan1 local values. And I'm going to put a slash and the word colors because values equal colors equal values. We're looking at a color picture, but we're making it a black and white drawing. So we're changing the colors to values and we're not just randomly guessing. We're trying to make the distinction between the lighter and darker ones in the same way that the photograph explains it. So we're creating a contrast distinction. Therefore, I'll pretend like this is like an Adidas sweatshirt. And the whole thing is going to be, first of all, multiply. The whole thing is going to be a darker value. But there's those stripes in it. I'll put the stripes in next. And since this is digital, I can do this. If it was traditional, I would have to keep some of those spaces open because erasing this back out might not work as well. I might not be able to get it back to pure white. All right, so now we want the Adidas stripes on it. Place where they're going to go. And then we go on our travel. So there's stripe number 1. Stripe number 2. And then stripe number 3. Along here, up and over, inward, outward, along the back, up and over, and upward. So we have 2 values. This is a 2-value surface, so the notan of light and a notan of a darker value, and we can see their contrast. Then we have a light source on it. So this is a totally different pattern of notan. So what this notan will tell us is if this is our lit side, and over here will be our shadow side, is the shadow pattern light in contrast? Is it middle? And I can push that middle just a little farther. Middle in contrast? Or is it high in contrast? So high, middle, low, contrast. So what is the contrast? Meaning, how bright is the light? Is the light like a foggy day? Or is it like the sun? Or is it somewhere in between? Your shadow patterns, when you block them in, depending upon how dark you make them, will explain this. So on the middle value object, then, we're pushing the shadow pattern to a certain darkness because the light is a certain kind of bright. And it needs to be consistent all over, which means that in the lit areas, the lighter areas rather, what we're going to see in contrast will be a little bit different because the lighter value, and I'll show you this over here, a lighter value object versus a darker value object and a light source hitting it can't be the same because that doesn't make a distinction between a lighter object and a darker object. So the shadow that's on a lighter object has to be lighter within it, and it will still have the same contrast as the darker space. So that means that lighter and darker values will have a slightly different way that it shares with you the contrast of the light source. Darker objects will have darker shadows fall across them. Lighter objects will have lighter shadows fall across them because the surface is lighter or darker, not because the light changes. The light will stay the same across all of those objects. So this first, or this notan pass, this second pass, helps explain the relationship of the first using a light And this shadow pattern is the light. This tells the viewer how bright the light is within the picture space. For the one and only person that I have in here, does all of this make sense to you, or is there anything confusing about this? And sorry, I only have you to work with. Okay. For those of you who are not here, I don't know if it is going to help you or not, but that is the rough of it. So when you turn in your files, file number 1 is nothing more than the flat values. Layer number 1, sorry. Layer number 2 is taking that and including the shadow pattern. So this is local value notan. And I'll just say, like, let's just say it, dark pants, light shirt. There's our 2 values. I should have that on here too. And when I go to the shadow pattern layer, which I need to make a new one of because I just went darker there, I can probably use the same value right now. On the darker area and the lighter area, notice that it still reads like a constant shadow. Squint your eyes. And the shadow doesn't change darkness or lightness just because the object changed lightness. The shadow is the same constant value through the whole object. And that second layer shows you that. So the second layer is the notan for the light source. Notan light source. Notan local value. So then you have your photo reference, your armature with your action lines, and your wireframe, which would be this grid. Then you have your action lines, wire grid, and notan 1. And then your last picture is notan 2. And you're trying to get rid of your line drawing at that stage. It's just becoming a fully complete painting, showing the lighter, darker, middle valued stuff, all lit by the same light source. So everything has the same feeling to it all over. Those are each of the different layers that you would turn in. So you would have your photo reference, your armature and the action lines, your armature action lines and wireframe, armature action lines, wireframe, notan 1 local values, armature action lines, wireframe, notan 1, notan 2 light and shadow. And that would be all the different iterations of your drawing that you would turn in. This is what I've been asking for. And some of you are doing that for sure. But I'm reiterating this for the rest of you who aren't getting it correct yet. For some reason, there's some lack of total clarity here. And I want to make sure that everything is very clear in that sense. So now I'm going to rely upon the one and only person in here again and ask for any more questions that you might have. And think broad scope generalizations, think specifics, think details, think on all those different platforms and find something that is bothering you or giving you any kind of problem that I might be able to address, because more than likely if you're experiencing it, someone else is also equally experiencing it in the same sense. And sorry to put you on the spot, but technically I'm done explaining everything that I needed to. Yeah, well, sometimes, well, I know that a few people had written me and said that their internet was acting a little bit weird and they weren't sure if they'd be able to make it or not. So that's perfectly fine. And then there's others who I think don't come because they didn't get their videos first. And I guess I can understand that, but not really because you're paying money for a class. And I would expect that you would want as much attention as possible to get that money's worth. I mean, I know that regardless of what I do or don't do in a class, I'm still going to go to all of them and I'm still going to be the one asking a whole bunch of questions because I'd like some answers. As much as I might not be showing you what I'm getting out of it, I'm still going to try and pry more information from you because I want my money's worth. I want to get as much out of this as I can. And not that I won't ever come back, of course I will. And I might take the class a second or third time, but right now is important to me to pick your brain and get out of it as much as I can so that I can go off and practice and try to make really good informed decisions about what I'm doing when I practice. And that's only going to come from expert advice and expert training, which I'm more than happy to fail to learn from and ask a lot of questions to get from. I mean, because of course, that's just me. I'm like that. But I think everybody should be like that when it comes to education. It's your time that you're devoting. Make sure that you put the best in that you can with that time. And even as much as you might not think that, you know, your parents are the ones sending you to college, no, you're putting in the time here. And this is something you truly want. Make sure that you focus on this and give yourself the most for whatever time you have. Get your money's worth. I can only throw diversions for so long. Did you have any other questions by chance? Okay. While you're working, you should be writing things down. And I'm not just saying this because you're now lacking questions, but when you're working, you're experiencing then. And it is hard to recall the experiences, especially if they were all traumatic. Me, we're probably pushing most of those out as much as possible. But when you experience something and you know that, oops, I messed up, write that down. Like you may or may not have an answer for it, but write it down anyway, because then it's conversation where you write it down and you look at it and go, oh, I know how to answer that. That's fine, but write it down anyway because it's opening you up to the areas you feel weak or lacking in support and you'd like to fill it. You'd like to learn how to make it better. And I think that list is really useful in that way. It gives you a list of things, if nothing more, if you're not training with anybody at the time, it gives you a list of things to work on. I'm trying. I got nothing right now. I mean, I could just do another demo. I don't really want to just do another demo. I'd rather do something that is like, I need to see this again, and I need to hear you explain it while you do it so I can remember this forever and ever. Because every time I watch this video, it doesn't totally answer my question. Or I didn't know this would be a question, but I don't know how to ask it now that you've shown me something and only halfway went there. So for a transparent material, you first paint what's underneath and finish it all off as if it isn't there. So we'll just say like this arm, we'll put a plastic layer over the top of it. So then we do the plastic layer and we figure out like what kind of lightness or darkness the plastic needs to be. So then we'll put that over the top of it. And then we'll bend it to the folds and we'll do whatever it takes to make it fit to the thing that's underneath. So out along in here, we'll go and we'll bend this. We'll bend this to the elbow. We'll stretch this away. We'll fold this along here. We'll clean up this edge over here, but make it extend out beyond those folds. And then we'll push it in right along in there. All right, so we can see through it, but there's one area probably that we're going to see through it more than others, and that'll be at the 3/4 edge where it's the closest to our view. So somewhere right along through here, it's probably going to be more visible. Then we need to put something on there to explain shininess, because I'm going to assume that anything that's clear or plasticky is also going to be shiny. So wherever our light source is coming from, then this is going to be reflecting it. Where's the others? Here, here. Those are all the spaces that are lifted higher. And then anything that's sunken in will also have some kind of reflection back at us because of the dip down below, just like the height. Highlights go across here. They also go across the low part. Then we're going to probably see some shadows in a few places, especially where the plastic might fold over on itself. So we might see like some kind of like plasticky fold right across here. And we might see something like right along in here. And then that's going to fade up this way. And we might see something like on the underside over here. And maybe something like right underneath here. And then that's going to fade really lightly back into the plastic. And then we might see something again right along in here. And that's probably how you would do the plastic. So remember that all of these here are the plastic layer that sits over the top of all that. And we can see through it, and we have the textures on top of it that give us an idea that this is a little bit different than the things that are sitting underneath it. It's very similar to how you're going to be building lace, doing it in multiple layers, building one layer and then ghosting it with another layer on top or underneath for shadows or highlights or whatever it is that you need to stack on top of each other to get the most out of the layering system. I've got my Google search up if there's any other questions. I'm ready to look for the answers. No, I'm ready to find an example if we need to paint anything else. But the weight of the world is upon your shoulders to provide us that question. No pressure. Whoa, hey, a lot of did you post it up over in where it's supposed to go? Because if you did, I'll just look at it with the rest of them. If it's posted where it's supposed to be posted, I'll just gather it with everything else. Okay, yeah, then I'll just redo that video and I'll add it to it. Thank you for letting me know that it's over there so I can do that. And Daniel, whenever you get a chance, make sure that you post up your homework. I know you had some questions about something during the week regarding the homework. Oh yeah, that was one of the questions. I just want to make sure. Yes, I want to make sure here that you all understand there is no wrong model, only wrong lighting. Like you can have bad lighting, but you can't go wrong with anybody, whether it's a child or an adult, whether it's like a, a humanoid, like some kind of Star Trek humanoid, or it's a period piece costume. It doesn't matter. If you can gain something from it through the layering or through just the fact that the figure has something worn on it and you're trying to get both of the things to work properly, use it. It doesn't matter what the reference is coming from. You can use whatever. So there are no limits to that. The only thing that I ask you to try and do is get the best lit reference you can find. The lighting should be clear and easy to understand, unidirectional, very simple. And if you can keep it that way, then you will have an easier time studying from it. If the lighting is confused, meaning there's more than one light source in it, and it's really easy not to see that. But that rim light, that fancy rim light that's on some models, that's a second light source. That's not just one light source being bright on one side and not as bright on the other. That's multiple light sources. That's when things get confusing. And just like fashion photography, when there are no shadows, when all of the shadows have been completely blown out because the clothing is what's important. In fashion photography, it's about showing off what the clothing is. It's not important to put it in a fancy photo. They don't care about that stuff as much unless it's going into a fashion magazine and they need a cover or something that really needs to be striking. Then the photographer can be a photographer. But otherwise, fashion photography is not about capturing a subject matter and doing it well. It's about capturing the clothing as the subject matter and showing it off well so that there's potential anticipation for purchase, because that's what fashion photography is doing, is it's trying to entice an audience to want to purchase something. When you're looking at it and it's all buried in shadows, you really don't even know what you're looking at, so you have no idea what to buy. And remember that fashion photography is a vehicle for purchasing. It's a vehicle for sales. It's driving the market. It's driving people to purchase things. So if those photos are too artsy, then they're not really useful to help sell things. But for us as artists, they're not useful at all because they are not well lit. We need pictures that are well lit. That's what artists need. We need the good lighting. We need a good proportion of lighting so that we can recognize the form and then render the forms. Because if the lighting is ambiguous, so are the forms. And it makes our job a lot harder to solve the problems of what we're trying to kind of look at, look for, translate, and make the same decisions so that it feels just as real, if not more real, in our illustration than what it is that we copied, if we need to rely upon copying things. And there's nothing wrong with that. All right, are there any last moment questions here? Everybody go back and watch the part about lighting again on this in this particular Q&A. The little fancy light and dark and all that stuff that I just went over, because that is how you are turning in your images. Yes, there are a lot of them next to each other when you turn it in, but this is the only way for me to be able to go through all the steps that you're thinking about. If I don't see the steps, I don't know if you're thinking about it. And in this class, you have been given steps to think about specifically so that you can do the process the right way. Oh, you're welcome. I'll answer I'll answer questions anytime. Just throw me some questions. But there's a process in here, and the only way that I can grade you on your process is if you give me the process to see. And since we can't post videos because that's extremely expensive as far as memory goes, the next best thing is for me to get you to put it in an order and save it off at very specific stages, which should help you understand staging a picture and what each stage means and when to end it. It's the same thing. Once you have the whole thing done, take a picture, snapshot it so I can see the stage, now move on to the next one. That's how drawing works. You go through the whole thing, build the stage, judge that stage, move on to the next one. And what you have created should inform the next one to make it even easier to solve. That's how we stack it. That's how we do. All right. All questions have been answered in here. I think I've output everything I can think of. Well, with one more thing too. Make sure that you don't turn in monster size files. Notice right now that this document has two numbers right down here in the lower left corner, 5.93 and 81.4. 81.4 is the expanded file size. When I open it up, that's how big it's going to get because of all these layers that I've used. But when I compress the file down, and if I were to get rid of all the layers, let me go ahead and just flatten it for a second. Go to image. Wait. Meh, what am I doing? Sorry, never mind. Flatten image. See how the file is now only 5.93 megabytes? So one layer on its own is 5.93 megabytes at this size. Image size is 26 by 15 inches, which is in pixels, 1920 by 1080p. That is standard video size. That is 1K format. 2K format is 2048. 4K format is 4096. So that's the pixel size across. But we're in here, we only need the 1920 by 1080 at 72 resolution. That's as big as we need to go, which keeps the file down to around 6 megabytes. That's the CGMA way, when they thumbs up you and go, yeah, you're doing it right. But when you're turning that file in at 81 megabytes, because it's at 300 DPI or it's 72 inches by 48 inches or something crazy big, then you've got everybody frowning at you, thumbing you downward. Thumbs down. You have done the bad thing. You are ousted. Now, you cannot turn in those files large because they don't like the files large. They take up all the space on the server when the files are too big. So please make sure that the file sizes are a moderate file size. Somewhere around 6 megs is perfect. 6 to 8 megs. If you have a bunch of other drawings on there, it might go up a little bit, but it should not be 40 something megabytes. That's much too large. And that is definitely a questionable thing that they will question us about because we're turning in such large files when we really don't need to be. So please make sure that you reduce that file size. Make everybody's life a much, much nicer and happier place. All right. Good luck with your homework this week. If you have any other questions, please email me and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. Thank you again. Take care. Have a great week.